Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, softball fans. My name is Coach Anthony Williams. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Connected Athletics. We are a technology company based in Austin, Texas, where we're focused on using our technology platform to allow student athletes, college athletes, and professional athletes a place to tell their story in their own words, to share their journey with other athletes, hoping to help them as they go through their journey. Before I get into our guest tonight, who is a very special extended member of the family, let me first thank our sponsors. First, I want to thank Buffalo Wild Wings. They are a company that is focused on helping student athletes across the country and specifically here in the state of Texas tell their story. So I want to thank them for sponsoring the podcast. I also want to thank Go Edit Graphics, a new graphics company based out of Nebraska that is helping high school and college athletic programs use dazzling graphic images to do outbound communication, team schedules, player spotlights, any outbound communication about their sports teams. They can use these default graphics designed by Go Edit Graphics, customize it with their mascot and their team colors, and then use it out there to share information with their fan base and their athletes. Lastly, a company in Houston called Epic 24/7. They are a new sports apparel company. A good friend of mine, Stefan Johnson, is CEO. Epic stands for Every Play I Compete, and they are an exciting new apparel company that does uniforms and jerseys and a whole bunch of really cool stuff. So look those three up. I want to thank them for sponsoring our podcast. With all that said, I want to bring in somebody who I've known since she was about 10 years old. Brooke Vestal is a current junior at Ole Miss. She's also a 2021 Women's College World Series champion. She just finished her career at Oklahoma and will now be playing at Ole Miss. Brooke played for me back when she was playing in her club days, back when she was 10 and 12. She went to New Braunfels High School, and she just got home from finishing up at OU and is excited about her future, which we'll talk about at Ole Miss. Brooke, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you finally.
I know, lots of phone calls, but we haven't seen each other in a while.
Yeah, no, very proud of you. Looking forward to telling your story. Let's jump right in, Brooke. So I want to first start kind of with the beginning. When I first got a chance to meet you and your family, you had just left another organization, came to join Coach Placido Garcia and myself and Coach Gary with the Austin Stars Garcia. You were a pitcher, you were tall, you were gangly. Let's just say you weren't that coordinated back then, and we kind of had a lot of fun working on your athletic ability, your feet. Tell us a little about your experience early on, your club experience and transitioning to the Stars.
So my club experience originally started with my transition from Little League to my first travel ball team. And the first day I bawled and begged my parents not to take me back. It was hard. It was out of my comfort zone. I was no longer the best player. I was being pushed. I was being challenged. But I kept going back and kept going back. And soon I moved to a little bit bigger of a travel ball team, and then I ended up moving to the Texas Bombers for 12U, and I was just not ready. I wanted to be a part of the team, and I wanted to contribute, but they were looking to win now, and I wasn't in the same place. I needed to be developed, and that's what took me to the Austin Stars and what kind of started our journey together, because I needed someone to help develop me and teach me the ins and outs, the little things of softball that I didn't already know and wouldn't allow me to contribute on the Bombers at that time. So I moved over to the Stars, which I think was the best decision I could have made for my softball career. As you said, I started off very awkward. I got to the practices, and the first day, y'all said we're conditioning. I was like, huh? We're doing what now? And you pulled out the ladders and jump ropes and all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, these people are crazy. But now I know that was the best thing for me. I was 6 foot by the time I was 10 years old. I wasn't very coordinated, and I needed to be taught how to be an athlete, not just to be a pitcher, but to be an athlete that can contribute to my team in a lot of different ways, and that can help myself through just getting better at the little things. That was a big thing for me, was learning to be more of an athlete.
Yeah, no, Brooke, it's a great start to the interview. I remember first getting you and you telling me, hey, I'm not that great of a pitcher right now, so I want to learn how to play first base and I want to learn how to hit. And we went, okay. And you actually turned out to be a pretty decent first baseman and developed a pretty consistent bat. Tell us about, I know there's a lot of pitchers now, as you know, who all they do is pitch. Some of them don't even want to field. It's like I pitch and that's it. Talk about that mindset if you want to say, you know what, I'm not that great of a pitcher now, so let me learn some other drills. Let me learn another position in case I blossom there. Talk about that mindset of wanting to learn new positions.
It definitely took me out of my comfort zone, but I wasn't sure if that time I wanted to be a pitcher. I was also playing volleyball, so I was like, why? I don't want to limit myself. I want to do as many things as I can. And if that means learning how to play first base and learning how to hit, and maybe being a little bit uncomfortable at the time, I knew that it was only going to benefit me in the end. I know that a lot of people are POs now. I was a PO at Oklahoma and at the end of my travel ball career, but I do think that that experience playing first base and hitting and having to be more than just a pitcher really did help me become a well-rounded athlete and be able to contribute to the team and understand them a little bit better rather than just being in my bubble as a pitcher.
You know, you remember our team motto back then, hard work pays off. And tell the audience a little bit about your time when you first noticed, you talked about earlier with the speed ladder and the ropes and the planks and all that stuff. When did you start to feel like, hey, I'm starting to become a pretty good athlete? Remember we used to tease you about, hey, when you hit doubles and triples, like Brooke just ran a triple out and standing up. When did you first feel that difference of, hey, this hard work is paying off? I do feel more athletic, a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, a little bit better of a first baseman and hitter. When did that first hit you as a player?
Honestly, my leaps and bounds for myself and what my hard work was doing for me didn't hit me until we went to PGF. Our first year, we were the smallest team there. We had not very many players, didn't have a lot of hype. Everyone else had 20 players, all about my size. We had me and a very height, tiny team, but we worked hard. And I didn't notice that hard work until we got to PGF and we started beating people and started getting a little bit more attention, a little bit more respect for what we were doing and what we had accomplished. So for me, it didn't really click until that next summer when we went to PGF and I finally got to see what my hard work can do for me when we started beating some of the best teams in the nation and competing with the best that was out there.
You mentioned it earlier, and I think all college coaches of all sports love athletes that play multiple sports. You were pretty good in volleyball. Talk about how softball helped you in volleyball and vice versa, how volleyball helped you develop into a top softball player.
I think the important thing was it allowed me a break while still getting to do something I loved and still staying active. So it challenged me to be competitive. I had to work extra hard in volleyball because I was only dedicating half of my year to it. So it really pushed me to have to be able to focus on two things and be really good at two things. And it worked different muscles that I would have never worked in softball. That helped a lot, I think, with athleticism too. In volleyball, I had to learn how to move quick, had to learn how to read people. And those were things that I didn't really have to do when I was pitching. So it forced me to use different parts of my body that I probably wouldn't have worked a whole bunch on. I normally, when I would come back from volleyball, I'd always feel faster, stronger, like I was seeing the ball better. And I just felt mentally rested. I feel like if I had played softball all year long, 365 days a day, 365 days a year, it would have gotten a little bit
monotonous.
Yeah. And volleyball gave me a different opportunity to express myself as a volleyball player. I think this sport's are really interesting. In volleyball, I was more of a role player. And I thought in softball, I was the pitcher, I was the center of the attention, but in volleyball, that wasn't me. I was a role player and my job was to block. And I had teammates that were the girl. And I think it was a really humbling experience to be able to see the flip side of the coin. Like, this is what it means to be a team player and to learn how to help my team in different ways than being the number one pitcher, the best player on the team, what I could do from a different role for my team.
You know, Brooke, a lot of people see you now and they say, hey, I remember her, number one pitcher, number one player in the 2018 class. You're playing softball, you're playing high school, volleyball. On the Edna Bromfields, you guys had some really good deep runs in the playoffs. And you mentioned, hey, I did two things pretty good. Well, you did three things really good. We forgot the most important one is your academics. Talk about how you balanced and manage your time of playing softball, playing volleyball, and keeping your grades up so that you can get into a school like University of Oklahoma. Talk about that time management.
Honestly, I think our parents were really important with that. I talk to my friends sometimes. I'm like, I wouldn't do homework growing up, but that wasn't the standard for us. It was just kind of an unspoken rule. Like, we get our stuff done and then we can do what we want. We get our stuff done, we go to practice, and then what time we have left is up to us. So that can be a lot of time if we prioritize it properly, or it's not very much time. And then we're freaking out, running in all different types of directions. So we learned early on, hey, there's only so many hours in a day. And you can either have a lot of hours to yourself or you can have not very many and a lot of stress. So that really helped me in preparing from middle school to high school and then high school to college, just understanding there are 24 hours in a day, and that's a lot. When you set everything out and say, okay, I've made a list, here are the things that I need to do, it's not as daunting. It's like, okay, I can do this first. Oh, check, that's done. Now I'm on to the next. Instead of having 15 things jumbled in your head, like, okay, I got to do this. And then after this, I got to do that. Just being able to lay it all out and see it and say, okay, here's my plan. I think that really helped me.
Absolutely. Talk about now as we move through your transition. So you have a great high school career, and then you're also playing, you go from the Bombers to Little Austin Stars, and then you go on to play for Firecrackers, their national team. Talk about that experience playing for the coach out there, and just, a lot of people don't know this. Talk about these two things, how you actually left home and kind of lived in California away from your home while you're playing for Firecrackers. And then also how, going back, you kind of committed to OU before you played a high school game. Talk about that, because obviously those days are over now with the NCAA, but back then you had 6th and 7th and 8th graders like yourself committing to schools when they hadn't even went through high school. What was that experience like from a maturity standpoint?
I think it forced a lot of us to grow up rather quickly. Like I talked about our first PGF run, I was in 7th grade, and that was kind of the first time that I got attention from college coaches. And that was the first time my family and I were like, oh my goodness, this is something that I could legitimately have a shot at, being a D1 softball player and living out the dream that we all have from our T-ball days.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you know it, it's 8th grade, we're at PGF, we had a really deep run, and I'm getting invited to camps. And I'm like, wow. And at that point, OU had just won in 2013. I knew that I was really interested in them. What Coach Gasso had there was something I wanted to be a part of. And I decided to commit. I was very young, but at that time I thought it was what was best for me. And it was hectic, but I think the after is what was more so. Committing was exciting, but then you're a kid and you got everyone looking at you. All eyes are on you. She's going to Oklahoma. She's doing this. She's doing that. And I was forced under a spotlight that I wasn't ready for, nor was I mature enough to handle. And I think that early recruiting had a big play in that, just having all eyes on me, waiting for me to mess up or even do good. Just, it's a lot of pressure for a 13-year-old girl to have on her, to carry through high school.
Yeah, I remember when you had left and went to the Firecrackers, and we were back down. Actually, we were at the tournament in Colorado. And I remember coming to see you play, and I saw you afterwards, and you were just like, Coach, the game's not fun to me right now. And you and I took a little walk, and we talked about, hey, you can be all #1 recruit and all this pressure and playing for a big team, but the games still got to be fun. Do you remember that conversation?
I do.
Yeah.
And I think that it helped me a lot. Gave me a little bit of perspective on the whole situation, because when you're in the middle of it, it's easy to be, I'm just a softball player.
Yeah.
This is all I am. And if I'm not doing well at it, then I'm not doing well at me.
Yeah.
I'm not a good me anymore. And it's easy to get caught up in that world of softball's the only thing that matters, and that is my identity. And I think that offered a little bit of perspective, and I was able to come out of it, I think, a little bit slower than I would have hoped. I had our sophomore year, we won PGF. I'm still riding high. Life is good. And then junior year, I get a little bit of an injury, and I think I let the moment get bigger than it was, and I let it impact me more than it probably should have. But I took the game and made it more serious than it was, because in the end, it is just a game. We love it. We work really hard at it. But when it's all said and done, it is a game, and it should be fun. And now that I'm older, I understand that.
Well, I look at it now also, same perspective. I mean, it was tough going through it, but you look back now, like, I needed to go through that to develop into the young woman you are today, not just as a student athlete, but just as a person. And that when you have a future adversity, whether it's mentally or physically, whether an injury or transition, you'll be more prepared to handle it because of that situation. So, I mean, it didn't feel great back then going through, but I know it helped you. And what we're about to talk to now about the transition. So, every softball player that's watching this podcast will be like, oh my God, Brooke went to OU. Who would ever want to leave OU? Talk about the first experience, that transition from high school, from New Braunfels Canyon to OU and playing for Coach Gasso in one of the top programs in the history of college softball. What was that first transition, those first couple of years like?
I think I got really lucky with some amazing coaches throughout my years as a player, from playing with the Austin Stars, for playing with the Firecrackers, that helped make the transition easier, but it's still really difficult. For me, the hardest part was leaving my support system behind.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I had a great support system, not just my family, but we had close family friends. I had my friends, my teammates from travel ball. and my support system was something I didn't realize I would miss when I got to school. And I think the biggest transition period for me was finding a new support system up in Norman. And that would be advice I'd give to anyone. Things are going to get overwhelming, but it's okay to ask for help. And who do you have in your corner when you're having a bad day or when you've had a great day? What kind of support system do you have for yourself to help with those lows and also to be there for those highs? So that's what took me the longest when I did get to OU. But the transition softball wise was different. I ended up redshirting my freshman year, which was not something that I saw in the plans for myself. When you get to college, you were the best player on your high school team. You're the best player on your club team. And everyone wants to go to college and be the freshman All-American. You want to be the girl on the mound that takes you to the World Series. And for me, that just wasn't in my cards. And I had to sit down and go, I'm not ready. I have so much to learn. This is the perfect team to learn on. I got to play with Sydney Romero and Shea Knighton and Kaylee Clifton. I got to play with some of the greatest names in college softball and learn from them without the pressure of all eyes on me. And I wouldn't trade my red shirt for the world. To learn what I did and the experiences that I had will stay with me, not just throughout softball.
Brooke, you bring up a great point. You know, a lot of freshmen who play on Bombers, Firecrackers, Blaze, all the top programs across the country think, okay, when I go be a freshman, well, I'm just going to do the same thing there. I'm going to dominate. Talk about how, and let's be honest, how it can be humbling that, you know what, as good as you were, the jump in the transition from high school softball and top club program softball to a P5 college program like an OU, it's still a big jump. And you're not going to be able to just walk right in and replace some junior or senior right away. What was that experience like?
It was different for me. Like we talked about, I was the #1 recruit in the nation. We won PGF. I wasn't, other than volleyball, in the softball world, I wasn't used to not being that girl. And to get there and realize, wow, I got a lot to learn. I'm not where I thought I was. There's a lot that I need to get used to, that I need to adjust to. And I had to figure out how to help my team without ever stepping on the field. And everyone's always talking about, you need to be pushing the play, and you do, and that's great. But sometimes you might have an All-American in front of you, but who's pushing that All-American?
Right.
Who's making them better? I redshirted, but I got to throw live every day. Just about. What was I doing to make my team better? As a redshirt, it would have been easy to be like, this doesn't matter. Whether I pitch good or I don't, I'm not going to play. But no, I had to learn. I can still help the team. I can still chart during games. What can I do to help our pitchers? I can still pick other teams and communicate with my infielders. There's so much that I learned I could do without ever having stepped on the field to benefit my team.
Well, and I think also, you know, pitching against one of the most explosive offenses every year, some of the best hitters in the country out of OU every day, maybe didn't feel like it at the time, but it actually was making you a better pitcher because not everybody has hitters like OU. I mean, I don't know what they're putting in the water up in Norman, but they constantly put out some of the top hitters in the country every year. Talk about that experience of, hey, I'm not playing games, but I'm throwing against Shea Knight and all these great other players, and it's going to help you down the road. I mean, what was that feeling like? Hey, this is going to help me out, maybe not now, but down the road. I mean, what was that feeling like?
My freshman year, it was definitely a little bit more nerve-wracking. Like, I would say that was a big adjustment too, getting to the campus, and these were all my heroes. I watched the World Series every year, every game. Sydney Romero to me was famous. She was someone that I looked up to, and now I'm her teammate.
Right.
Now I'm not the girl in high school that watches college games. I'm the girl that's here on the team at the games. That was a big adjustment to get over, like I'm here with them. I earned a spot here on this team, and I have a lot to learn from them, but I'm a part of this team, and we're all one working towards a common goal. But after my freshman year, I figured out how incredible it was to be pitching against the offense I was. And if I could do well against them and learn how to beat them, I was going to be pretty okay in the end. And that's what's hard about throwing live in college. You're facing your offense a few times a week. They know every pitch you have. They know what you want to throw and in what counts. And as a pitcher, you got to figure out, how am I going to beat them?
Right.
I know what they've got and they know what I've got. So who's going to find a way to compete and come out with the win? And I think that that's what makes OU so amazing, is we're competing every single day, not just to be the best we can be, but to have the best team we can be. And I think that's really important for any team, high school, club, college, to understand iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And if you're not playing behind the shortstop and you're not taking it seriously, she's not going to take it seriously. But if you're on her heels, you just made her better and you made the team better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Well, and just, it's kind of, you and I talked about this a lot, and I want to share this with a lot of student athletes out there, that sometimes you go to one of the top programs and it just is not a good fit, and so you actually end up leaving. We'll talk about your transition from OU to Ole Miss here in a second, but, talk about how it feels that when you are on a team and you're just like, hey, it just isn't a fit, whether it's you and the players, you and the coaches. Talk about that decision that you had. You're going through COVID and you're fighting to find a spot. And that moment when you kind of realize, you know what, this may not be the best for me as a person, as a student athlete going forward. Talk about that difficult period that you and I had many conversations about.
It was hard. I mean, I committed to OU in the 8th grade and I loved it for the next 5 years. And I loved it for the 3 years that I was there. I genuinely loved being a Sooner. I loved the university, but I did commit early, and people change and they go in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in my life, I'm in a different place than I was when I was 13 years old. And what's best for me now isn't what was best for me then. So it's really hard to make the decision. But at some point I had to decide, okay, I do love this place, but what's best for me? And where can I be the best version of myself?
Yeah. And obviously now the transfer portal is a big part of, I'm involved in a lot of football, and obviously in softball too. Every year it's like coaches like, hey, you know what? There's a lot of good players out there. I know you weren't in the transfer portal very long, but just share with a lot of these student athletes that maybe have to go through that experience. There's kind of this dreamy, like, oh, you know what? It's not working. Let me go into the portal and I'll go someplace. Talk about just your experience in dealing with the portal and how it helped you transition to Ole Miss.
It's nerve-wracking. You get the email, you just entered the transfer portal, and then it's a waiting game. And you're like, okay, I have this list of schools that I want, but who's going to reach out? Am I being realistic? Am I not being realistic enough? There's a lot that goes into it that when you're not there, it's like, okay, I'm going to enter the transfer portal. You're excited. And then when you finally get in it, it gets real. It's like, this is my future that I'm talking about. And I don't have a lot of time to decide. Coaches are moving to get players are moving to get schools, and we're all trying to find the best fit for us. And we all have a different best fit. So it was very stressful for me personally, because I like to be in control of things and know what's going to happen. But to have to give up that control and be like, okay, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. Life will go on, and I'm going to make the best of my situation. And I ended up getting really lucky and finding the perfect situation for me.
Yeah. And for those players that are out there that may, whether you're in high school or in college and you're, maybe think about going to the transfer portal, I think the one thing that you and I have talked about that I want to get your opinion on is just how you may hear from schools, you're like, wow, school X contacted me. And then they tell you, we want you, but we don't have any money. Talk about that whole, like, hey, I did hear from the school, maybe I wanted to, but they're telling me I'm not going to be on the scholarship I was at my previous school. I'm going to be something less. Talk about that reality that players need to be aware of, that the money, the scholarship money isn't going to be like it was when you initially signed with the school.
I think that is really important, especially with COVID-19. It made rosters really inflated. There's a lot of people looking for a home. There's a lot of people that already have a home, and there's not a lot of money to go around. So I think it's important not to just be like, this is my one school, or I'm not going, like, I'm only going here. This is where I want to go, and I'm not looking anywhere else, because it's not realistic with the time that we're in. And I think because of money, that makes it all the more important to have good grades. What can you bring in academic money wise? Because if you're not taking your grades seriously, you're hurting a lot of coaches, because they can't, not everyone's going to be on a full ride. But what can you do to help your team by being good in the classroom and being able to kind of pick up a little bit of academic money? So I think that's really important. But just understanding that the portal isn't exciting and fun all the time. Like, there's reality to it. And the reality is not a lot of schools have money. Your number one choice might not have a spot for you.
Right.
But I think that opens new doors and new opportunities that are going to be really exciting.
Well, let's get to the good part now. So obviously, Ole Miss actually targeted you. We talked about it, and they had money. Talk about that transition and what it feels like to go to a school. And not that OU didn't want you, but you told me I felt like Ole Miss was kind of targeting me. And as soon as your name hit the portal, they were all over you and kind of rolled up the red carpet. Talk about that, your experience with the portal.
My experience with the portal went as well as I could have hoped. Just with the start of entering it, I had a great conversation with Coach Casso and Coach Rocha, left on a good note there. I entered the portal, and Ole Miss reached out to me quick, and I was really excited about it. I knew that they had a lot of things that I was looking for, but I didn't understand until I finally started talking to them, until I got up to Oxford, just how great of a fit it would be for me. And that's when I started getting really excited. I love talking softball, and to get to pick the minds of someone like Coach Traxel was really cool. And then getting to talk to Riker about pitching, I realized that Oxford was the place that I wanted to be, and I wanted to be a part of building that program and working with these coaches to help make the best team and to help be the best version of myself that I could. And I thought that they offered me both of those things.
Well, and the other thing you shared with me about that was not just the athletic side, but to find out that Ole Miss actually has one of the top accounting programs in the country, and you're in the SEC. I mean, talk about those non-softball things that also allowed you to check the box, like, yeah, this is the right fit for me.
Yeah, so I didn't know a ton about their accounting program, but I went on my visit and they're like, yes, our accounting program is number 3 in the country. And that for me was like, oh my goodness. They have the accounting program that I want. They have the master's program that I want. And I didn't realize until I was actually in the portal how important those things were. Because when you're not in it, it's easy to be like, okay, they're good at softball and they're located here and they won last year. But especially for softball players, our careers aren't forever. Most of us, it's going to end after college. And being able to hear that Ole Miss had the programs that I think will make me the most successful person after college that I can be, that was really exciting. And then I think that a lot of players dream about the SEC. The SEC definitely, it's super competitive conference. Every weekend feels like a regional or a super regional, which I think is hard to compete with. That's something that you don't find in a lot of places, and something that prepares you for postseason to be ready when the time is right. So those were 2 things for me I was definitely looking for.
Well, and you, as we finish up here, you talk about one of my favorite topics now is eventually softball's going to come to an end. It's not playing like it's like playing playing college football or college basketball. You know, there might be a next thing with the NFL or the NBA or whatever. Talk to us a little bit about what are Brooke's plans when her eligibility is over and you graduate from Ole Miss. What are some of the things you're thinking about doing when it comes to accounting or business? What do you want to do when softball's all over or you're done with softball?
I think that the NLI is really cool because that's something that I would like to work with. My goal in the beginning kind of has been to be a sports agent for female athletes. And I think that NLI opens up an entirely new market for that, and people that are going to need, I think the demand for sports agents is going to increase, especially for female athletes. I think that NLI is going to be something that's really special for female athletes because we don't have as big of a pro league after college, but I think that NLI is going to help open a lot of doors for female athletes to help set up maybe sponsorships for after college or just help get people's foots in the door. And I think that by being a sports agent, I can help female athletes work through all that.
I like that. It's a kind of a perfect storm right now with you're starting to see a lot of female executives in jobs that you never would have thought of even 5, 10, 15 years ago. They're executives in the front office for major league teams and not just baseball or softball. I mean, and they're all over the place. And so now you've got, NIL come in, and now you can realize if you have a strong brand in social media and a company's like, hey, we want to use Brooke to push our product or service. I mean, it's a great thing. I'm very excited, but just for everybody to understand your position, leaving OU and transitioning to an SEC school at Ole Miss. I mean, what are you looking to leverage from this whole new NIL process? It was kind of feeling like the Wild Wild West, and it's still forming. It's going to change, but what is your feeling towards it?
I have not been super educated on it yet. I know when I get to Ole Miss, they are really proactive about the whole situation, and they're working to educate all the athletes on the best way to go about NLI and the best way to brand ourselves and really benefit from this whole situation. But as I said, I'm really excited for what this holds for female athletes. I'm excited to see where this can take us and kind of grow our side of college athletics. Obviously, football and baseball and basketball, there's a future after, there's pro. But I think that NLI is going to allow a lot of little girls to see softball players in Gatorade commercials or Nike commercials, things that when I was growing up, I didn't really see. I saw football players or tennis players, but I think it's going to be really cool for little girls to see their future right there in front of them without ever having to turn the College World Series on. And then I think by seeing that, the College World Series is going to gain even more viewership than it already has, which is really exciting for our sport.
Brooke, last couple of questions. I'm gonna let you go. It's been a long day. You just drove and had a long ride back home to Texas, but you did a great job of articulating kind of your experience from being offered and committing in 8th grade to where you are now. What would Brooke today tell Brooke back when she was 13 that you didn't know back then that you know now? What's one piece of advice you give some other Brooke that's maybe thinking about committing early or is a top softball player? What advice you give them as you've gone through your experience now since the whole PGF at 12U experience?
That your experience is not her experience and her experience is not your experience. It's easy to look around and say, well, she's doing this, or they offered her, she committed here, but it's what's best for you. It's not what's best for anyone else because they're not living the journey that you are. And even if it looks a little different, it doesn't make it any less special or any less important. It just makes it different. And that's okay to be different.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Well, hey, I know you've been really busy getting ready for that transition. Tell us, when are you going to be taking off for Ole Miss? And you look good in the red and baby blue already, but when do you report? And tell us a little bit about your next transition.
So I will be driving up on August the 3rd. I'll be packing up my apartment in Norman, driving straight to Oxford and get moved in to a new apartment. Really excited about it. And then from there, we report back August the 4th. We start training together, getting to know each other a little bit better before the season starts. So it's not just August 23rd, boom, we're starting. We're working into it, working with strength coaches, each other, and just kind of building team camaraderie.
Brooke, one thing I wanted to do, forgot to mention earlier, was we talked about you and now with the graduate program, because you're already a junior academically. You're probably going to finish your degree here. I think you told me here coming up within the next year, and then probably start some of your graduate work. I mean, if this was kind of a win-win situation for both Ole Miss and you, talk a little about how, your transfer, hey, I'm a junior academically, but I'm only a sophomore athletically. Talk a little bit about that for a lot of those students that they don't get the part that it's important to stay focused on your grades as you go through this transition.
Well, while we're talking about academics, I want to go back to the transfer portal. You also have to understand a lot of your credits might not transfer. You might love school A, but none of your classes are going to transfer to school A. So now where does that put you? So there's a lot that goes into it, including what classes are going to count towards my degree when I get to my new school, if any, in the position that puts you in. But I was placed in a very interesting position when I redshirted my freshman year, and then COVID-19 happened. So I ended up a third-year freshman. So I, in May, will be done with my undergrad. And then as a junior, technically, eligibility-wise, I'll have 2 years left to work on my master's program. So nice. I get a really unique opportunity to finish a lot of school while still playing softball, which is really special.
That's awesome. Well, Brooke, hey, thank you for taking the time to share your story, to tell your journey, to hopefully, I think for sure any student athlete that watches is going to learn from it a lot and learn from your experience. I do appreciate your time. Tell the family I said hello, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon as you head out to Ole Miss and start a new career and a new life out there.
Sounds great.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. No problem. Thank you. Bye-bye.